Hello everybody, this is Jason. I'm your friendly garden manager with Grow Morristown. Today we're going to be talking about choosing a garden location and preparing for the plow. Now we probably just met at one of our recruiting events, and this is something that we just recently talked about. So I'm going to tell you how to do it. Now before we get started, I want to cover some paperwork. Now this is included in the email. You're watching the video, you're thinking about your garden location, you're going to email us some photos and some other paperwork so that we can get rolling. So just want to touch on that real quick. Again, all of this is in your email. I did want to say, try to ask questions or whatever in the comments below the video so that other people can see it. We'll get more mileage out of our time. If you ask a question, other people can see it. All right, getting into it. Choosing your garden location, sunlight, how your garden sits in relation to the sunlight, water, underground stuff, that all needs to be considered when choosing your location. Now, sunlight, food needs a lot of light. So you need 8+ hours of light each day. Some things can grow in 6 to 8 hours, but food needs a lot of light. Ideally, your rows are going to run east-west. If your garden area is flat, if you're on any kind of slope, your rows must orient along the contour. You let me know if you're on a big hill. We're shooting for no more than 5%, but we are in Tennessee, so we may need to look at your situation and talk about that. So there's a pretty basic diagram here. We're just looking at the difference between the winter sunset and the summer sun, and it's the difference creates these sort of areas where the light shifts throughout the year. So it just depends. You have to be really familiar with your property, and we're shooting for the full sun area, but you can grow a lot of good food in there. It just sort of depends. All right, this is a little more detailed diagram so you can get a visual of what we're talking about here. East to west, rows are running east to west, and we're out in full sun, or mostly full sun. Water and flooding, you're gonna need a lot of water. 25 by 25 foot garden is gonna need 400 gallons of water weekly. Gonna need access to water or some sort of plan besides carrying it. Running hoses, collecting rain, something. Got to figure something out. You do get to subtract out rainfall, but with weeks of no rain sometimes in Tennessee, you've got to have a plan. All right, you don't want to be in a flood zone. Should be obvious. It's not just the moisture; it's pollution as well. It's a big issue. If there's a lot of moss, that does indicate poor drainage and too much shade. It's going to be very difficult to grow vegetables and moss at the same time. They don't. That's one indication that it's just not enough light. Even if it seems sunny, if there's moss growing there, it's just not enough. Yeah, you wouldn't just look at this and immediately think that it would flood this much, but it does. And residential areas, there's a lot of pesticides and chemicals used on lawns, and so flooding in a residential area could be pretty toxic. And it's not just the moisture that you're concerned about; it's accumulation of who knows what. You don't want to eat it. All right, underground issues. I didn't know until I owned a septic system that the septic system was this big. When you're on city, where you're a kid and you don't actually own the septic tank, I just didn't know. So Be aware of where your drain field is. You don't want to grow on top of it. It's great if you don't have rocks or tree roots. That's preferred. You want to be far from the tree lines because the roots do extend out at least as far as the branches, oftentimes a lot farther. You do not want to grow near walnut tree. Walnut trees and gardens don't mix. There's I guess it's an enzyme or chemicals in the walnuts that prohibit plant growth. Herbicidal. You don't want that. All right. No one has a truly ideal location. Well, that's not true. Some people do, but it is. Everyone usually prefers they had something a little better. Do the best with what you got, and we're gonna figure it out. All right. Now, this is interesting. The entire first part was all about making sure you have enough light. Now we're going to talk about blocking light, and this is one way to kill your grass. It seems pretty obvious, but this is an opportunity to talk about a technique that's used a lot in organic gardening to control weeds and to manage your beds between different crops. You'll see. All right, so basically we're just blocking light somehow, some way. In this picture, we're looking at a tarp. Turf grasses are selected for their ability to tighten and compact the soil. They work very well at what they do, but like all plants, they need light and are immediately weakened and start to die when you block the light. So by killing and weakening the grass before you plow it, it doesn't. It not only does it make it possible to till, because it's almost impossible to till if you don't kill the grass, but without plowing, but it will reduce your work later on. Applying the tarps, mow it down, weed eat it, cut the grass down as low as you possibly can. This is a good time to add anything you want underneath it. Leaves, compost, or manure. You know that manure will, and leaves can have chemicals in it too, but manure can have herbicides in it. If the cow eats more herbicides, then the manure is going to have herbicides in it. And so there's just some simple questions. And so be aware that there are some questions you need to ask when you're getting manure off somebody. All right, and then you want to weigh it down. Especially, we're going to start talking about cardboard here in a second, but the Tennessee winds, certain areas and property, I mean, it's incredible, the wind that can, come over the top of the hill. Leaves. I was going to list this as an alternative, but this is actually, to go from grass to garden, this is one of my preferred things right here. If it's thick enough, it's gonna do the exact same thing as a tarp, but you're also gonna add a lot of organic matter. This is a garden. This is actually a garden that I grew. This, from this right here, this way is all brand new, and we've got a really strong tiller. It's actually a walk-behind tractor, but if the ground's real hard, you're gonna feel it. You're really gonna feel it, and no matter how nice it is, if the tiller's working hard, you're working hard. And I can tell you that the difference between the new and existing garden, you couldn't tell the difference. The leaves had done an amazing job, and plus, as it's tilling in, yeah, you should get in the habit of collecting and saving all your leaves every year for a good long while. It's one of the best things you can do to supplement and enrich your soil. But it's also a great way to just get started. You just get started by laying down leaves. Cardboard, another fantastic alternative. Here's some tips. huge pieces. Obviously, the bigger the better. If you wet them down, the tape just comes right off. No trouble at all. If you put the printed side down, have a little cleaner look. Think about going big. Think about uh, doing borders and cutting the grass back further than what you need to. You see a lot of these raised beds, and I know it's an aesthetic to have grass growing right up to the bed, but you can see sometimes people are in the process of building their beds, and the cardboard's just inside, and there's a whole inch all the way around on the inside. That's already starting off working hard, and unless you really have to have that look, I would suggest going big and think about that for your garden too, and go ahead and start killing that grass now. This is an opportunity to talk a little bit about how this is used commercially. What happens is that it gets really warm and moist in there. That kills the existing weeds, but then the seeds are going to germinate immediately. But of course, they're going to die because it's hot and dark and they can't survive there. Then what happens? The worms come in and they eat all this decomposing fresh organic matter, and they leave behind some of the most amazing fertilizer in the world. Takes about 4 weeks in the summer, 6 in the winter, and then you end up with almost completely composted uh, garden, and it's weed free. So that any seeds in that top layer of soil will have been germinated and died, and so it's we call that a sterile seed bed. It is a regular practice in organic no-till farms and gardens. You see these amazing gardens, and they're no-till and they're organic, and there's not a weed in sight. And what they've done is they've traded the tiller for the tarp, and that's a very common practice there for weed control, for preparing the beds before planting, and then crop turnovers in between each crop, and then for the cover cropping. This is a way that they can grow a crop specifically as, like, it's often called green manure, and then they'll use a tarp to kill that crop off, and it leaves behind all the organic matter on purpose. And they plant again. They're planting in a sterile, fertilized bed. So this is a technique if you want to consider this for your backyard. It is a great technique, and a good tarp is between 5 to 8 millimeters thick. These things are thick, they're heavy, they block 100% of the light. If you start looking around for these things, you're looking for words like silage tarps, blackout tarps, and even panda film. This is an example of how it can be used on a small scale. These techniques work great in small backyard gardens. You don't necessarily, you may, once or twice a year want to tarp your entire garden. But for the most part, you might be using cardboard or tarps or all kinds of found materials. There's a lot of opportunity for scavenging in doing this, but the idea here is of blocking light and trapping heat and moisture against the ground. Take care of your tarps and save your supplies. Cardboard, anything you scavenge after tilling, recover your area. That will exhaust the existing seed bank and kill those seeds off the top. There will be, if you're not able to tarp, well, even if you do tarp, there could be chunks of sod. Even with a good tilling, there could be sod, little chunks of grass that are going to immediately start growing. You can kill all that off immediately after tilling. Is a great time to do it. Just depends on if you can scavenge around these things up. Save those materials because you can use that to establish borders and footpaths. Here's kind of a peek ahead at Cheryl's garden. This is kind of the direction we're headed after all of this. So think about this, like this garden, a third, 25% of it, 25% of it, we'll say that, doesn't have to be weeded at all now because they're not even going to grow in the first place. So your footpaths and all of that, you're not going to have to weed these things. It's out. It's off the table now. It's not an option. You only have to focus where you're growing food. You see this far row here is already planted and it's mulch. There's not going to be much weeding to do there either because that mulch is going to block a lot of those weeds. I don't know what this is. It's probably wheat. Wheatgrass is a different kind of grass. A hard wind practically blows it over, and so keeping up on keeping the straw clean. If you mulch with straw, the little bit of straw that is going to pop up and start growing, not a big deal. Way easier than any weed you're going to wrestle with. And this is what it looked like, as it was coming together. This is immediately after tilling. You can see there's big chunks of sod in there, and this garden got the full treatment. This garden got treated nice with a big tractor, and still immediately you got these huge chunks. They're growing, and that leads me to what could go wrong. Is that immediately after tilling, the grass and weeds are going to start growing. It's time to start working it or taking care of it, planning, to get things growing, get the rest of the bare soil covered so the grass doesn't grow, and so it's go time. After we till, you definitely have to get started. Spring rains can delay us. Tight scheduling in between rain events, we can only till gardens one at a time, and you'll get like 2 days that you can till where you can only get to so many. And if rain then pushes us out, it just keeps going. It just takes a while. We have to be patient. We get it done when we get it done. And then sometimes even afterwards, if we plow and it's still too wet, the last thing we want to do is till it. It's just no good. Tilling soil that is too wet is devastating, and we're not going to do that. We may have to let it sit and wait a little longer. We won't know till we get in there. But that's one of the reasons why, even if it rained, if it hasn't rained for a few days, but it just depends. If it's still not dry enough, we aren't necessarily in a rush to come out until just because it's a nice day. It depends. It's complicated. I guess that's what I'm saying, is it's complicated. Hey, you want to help out? We need your help. Volunteers are always needed, especially with tilling. It's one of our biggest tasks, time-wise and physically. Tilling your own garden, helping me out when I come out. Hey, you want to learn how to run this tractor? I'll teach you. We'll share the task if you're able to. If you're not, I'm happy to till your garden. But if you can till yours or one or two others, it's a great help. It's a great way to help the program, and I don't know, it feels good helping people get started at this stage of things. It really does. You might consider financially sponsoring a current or future gardener. And that's it. One more time, get your paperwork to me, please. Thanks for listening. And again, ask your questions down below, and I'll see you next time.